Good evening or morning or whatever the heck time it is, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the 3D on Social Media Special Interest Group meeting. My name is Linda Nygren, and I'm the SIG coordinator for this year's virtual convention. Today, Gordon will be leading panel discussions and Q&A regarding ways to share 3D on various social media platforms. Gordon is an avid stereographer and 3D experimenter, tinkerer, making stereo photos, stereo videos, anaglyphs, extractions, and conversions, drawing upon a variety of sources. These include TV and film, artwork, NASA data, found footage, and more. His experiments include catadioptric stereos, artificial intelligence, slices and shapes, asymmetric framing, video panning, zooming of 3D stills, X-rays and fog as depth map sources, and more. Gordon is a proud member of and has presented and or written for the NSA, ISU, New York Stereoscopic Association, Virtual Stereoscopic Community, and the LA 3D Club. So without further ado, take it away, Gordon.
Well, thank you, Linda, and everyone else, and welcome, everyone. Thanks to the NSA folks for inviting me to moderate this again following last year's virtual con. And thanks to these panelists I've gathered, and for all of you for coming tonight. So first of all, I did want to say that we all appreciate how much events like this and how much the NSA are crucial to building and supporting our 3D community. But this event is once a year, right? And at our local 3D clubs, maybe meet once a month, maybe weekly, but social media is all day, every day. So if we're concerned with how to keep this community of enthusiasts alive and how to spread the gospel, as it were, we can't neglect social media. So I'd like to introduce briefly the folks I've invited to speak here today, and thanks to them again, we have David Kuntz, who many of you probably know. He started in 3D in the late 70s. He's been a member of the LA 3D Club since 1980. He's the current NSA treasurer. He did a spectacular job designing the con souvenir pack, including these guys and others, right? He has a physics degree and he works in the laser industry right now. But he, in terms of stereo activities, he does wonderful stereo work. He's produced a number of tutorials, and he just got, I think, the second place in the modern stereo card competition. So congrats, and check those out on the con website if you haven't. So thank you, David. We have Sarah Falk with us, who is a doctor by trade, and she became interested in 3D a few years ago, inspired by Dr. Brian May, like many others online. She does stereo photography and also 3D conversions, and has very impressive 3D collages. And I would say that she has a particular social media savvy for organizing people and doing things like putting together tributes for different occasions and for striking up friendships with famous people. And she's a member of the NYSA, the LA 3D, NSA, ISU, and others. So thank you and welcome, Sarah. We have Stephen Wong here from Sydney, Australia. He's a professional photographer, and he has particular interests in stereo photography and also artistic nude photography, and sometimes both at the same time. He's written a book on outdoor photography and is a photographic magazine editor. He's part of the Sydney Stereo Camera Club and helps manage that club's social media accounts. And he's also built his own 3D photography website. And by the way, I'll put some links for everyone's social media info and websites in the chat in a second. But yes, thank you to Stephen. And finally, we have Vanessa Grein here, who started her stereo journey, she says, about 5 years ago. She does great stereo photography work, and also recently has been doing what she calls deep space stereo drawings. And her series of modern stereo cards on that subject just won the first place. So congratulations and well-deserved to those beautiful cards, which also David Kuntz helped with, I believe. And Vanessa works as a spokeswoman in PR by trade, and recently has applied her talents to helping run the NSA 3D-Con, the official Instagram and Facebook pages, to great effect. I think she's been doing a great job. So there are our panelists to start out with, and of course, Linda also gave you a little background on myself. So what we're going to do is I've prepared some questions, some general social media questions, and we'll pose them to our panelists. But if anyone in attendance has any comments to add or any additional questions, please put them in the chat. We'll also open it up a little bit later to anyone who wants to unmute and ask questions. So to start out with, the first question here, what is your preferred social media platform for sharing and or viewing 3D work? And what do you see as its pros and cons? So any one of our panelists who wants to start with that.
Sure, I'll say something.
Please.
I think from the Sydney Stereo Club's perspective, which is my main interest at the moment, is we've been using Instagram as the main source of social media interaction because it's still primarily driven by images. It's a very visual platform and it has a very wide audience, obviously. It also has the ability through the hashtags, the ability to keyword your posts to be able to be discovered across a broader audience. So that's, I think, for us, the major interest in our social media approach.
I think this is a very Instagram heavy panel. I think it's just what Stephen said. It's really heavily built on images. I think the community is blossoming and growing more than any other social media platform that I've seen. There's a diverse demographic. It includes a lot of younger people, a lot of people of color, people all over the world. You can signal boost, share other people's posts to stories. That's a highlight function that lasts 24 hours. So it allows people to be exposed to people that their followers follow to allow you to grow a wider audience. I think the biggest con, in my opinion, is, well, there's a poor search functionality, both for posts and DMs. You can use hashtags, but that's just about it. And there are pretty bad aspect ratio requirements. Pictures don't have to be a square, but they all do need to be the same aspect ratio. And you can't really edit them in the app. You have to do it, before. So it just takes a little bit of finagling. And despite being heavily built on images, I think that the quality of the images often degrades on Instagram, which is kind of a bummer. But I haven't found a better social media platform for stereoscopy.
And let me add really quickly there that in this special interest group last year, I did put together a document that details the specific formatting limitations, not only for Instagram, but other platforms. And I'm putting a link to that in the chat there.
I just want to amplify on what was just said there. Instagram was designed exclusively to be a photo sharing platform, and the designers must have been complete idiots because it is the worst conceivable photo sharing platform. It's awful, but the simple fact of the matter is that this is where the people are, and if you want to wade into the community of newer stereographers, that's where you're going to go. If you want to deal with the old dinosaurs like me, go on Facebook. It's great. It's way more flexible, supports VR and all that sort of stuff. But my goal is, for the last whatever the heck it is, since 1980 to now, what is that, 40-something years, 41 years, is to expand 3D, to get new people interested in it and to nurture them. And that if you want to do that, you're on Instagram, because that's where all the excitement is happening. And I'll say right now, I will credit Brian May. He has brought more people into 3D, made more people aware of it than anyone since Sir David Brewster. And it's as simple as that. And again, that's where all the action is. And for better or for worse, yeah, I wish it was a better photo sharing platform, because it isn't. It's freaking awful. But if outreach is your goal, that's where you're going to be. If you want to, like I say, share stuff with the NSA crowd, then yeah, go to Facebook. It's fine. We're all there too.
That was the reason why we started the Instagram feed for our club. We were looking at refreshing our membership. We're looking to find a wider audience than just the traditional members, particularly in a situation where with virtual meetings and so on, we're able to reach out to potential members beyond the shores of Australia. And we do. We have Stephen O'Neill, we have people in New Zealand, all around the world. So it's actually very good. The thing about Instagram also, we found that, as you said, it's the formatting, the image resolution is very poor. It just doesn't work out very well for stereoscopic images. So my thoughts were that we would use Instagram as a way of being seen on the internet and then having a link on our Instagram bio that has a link to our webpage, so that anybody who's interested can use that as a stepping stone to head towards our website, and hopefully go to our website and actually have a look at some of our images and perhaps have an interest in joining the club.
Well, I want to expand a little bit on that, because I mean, that was essentially my thinking. I'm very heavily involved in the organization of three different 3D organizations: the LA 3D Club, which is a very large local 3D club; the NSA, which of course is hosting this event; and then for many years I was on the board of the International Stereoscopic Union, which is kind of the international version of the NSA. And when I first got on the Instagram, and even on Facebook, my goal was to attract those folks' attention and bring them towards the traditional community, to bring them into the NSA and all that. And what happened was, I was planning to do a show for the convention last year, when we were still planning to have a physical convention, long before COVID appeared. And I was trying to solicit images from all these folks on Instagram and explaining to them, hey, this is going to be done on a huge screen, and don't use all the parallax, don't use a vertical aspect ratio. And then we went virtual, and I suddenly realized, hold it, this is a great opportunity. I'm going to do a show that's meant to be looked at on a phone, that shows their images the way they are. And I suddenly realized at that moment that my goal was no longer to bring those folks to the NSA. It was to bring the NSA to those folks, to where they already were and where they're already working. And while I would like to see both happen, and I think they should both happen, like I say, I'm no longer on Instagram to bring people to other things. I'm in there to go both ways. And also, I just don't have the attitude that I see with a lot of conventional 3D dinosaurs, I think as we call them technically, where they somehow look down on these other formats. Oh yeah, your image is only that wide, so it must be terrible. Or wiggle GIFs or all that stuff. I'm the one who pushed Jasmine Dixon to have the wiggle GIF gallery, even though I know there's some resistance to it. To me, it's a completely valid format, and it's cool and it's fun. So like, what's the problem? I can't carry a 16-foot wide screen around with me. And so, yeah, I love looking at stuff on that, but the phone I got in my pocket all the time. So it's useful for that. And when I want to sit in a dark room and see something huge, then it's used. That's another format. They're all good and they all have a place. And like I say, my real realization is that let's take each one of these things on its own terms, accept them. Instagram is great. It doesn't need to be changed. I wouldn't mind pulling people also into other formats, but I don't want to desert what they're doing or to think somehow there's something wrong with it or inherently inferior. It's great.
I think also we have to remember that the audience, well, particularly for us, we're looking at members that are generally younger in age. And if you look at the generation, Instagram suits the younger generation. They're always on the phone, they carry the phone with them. And Instagram really was intended as an app to be used on a mobile device rather than on the desktop. Sure, the desktop version has got more and more capabilities, but originally, for example, you couldn't even post anything on Instagram through your desktop. You had to use a mobile device. And so that was the challenge. And the challenge that I see with our website, for example, is one is presentation. I noticed that if you look at a lot of websites that are related to stereoscopic images, some will post the side-by-side parallel images or cross-side, whatever. Some will post anaglyphs. But anaglyphs in particular, whether they're colored anaglyphs or black and white anaglyphs, don't look very inviting on Instagram. They're kind of visually busy. So one approach that I looked at was how to present some of the content that we had in a way that would attract a non-stereoscopic audience. So I came up with the idea that we present the 2D version as the main image on the Instagram page, but it's a multiple image post. So that way, as you swipe, you can look at the side by side, and you swipe again, you can look at the anaglyphs. I don't know, would you like to have a quick look at what I mean? If I just quickly show you what our Instagram page looks like.
Gordon is the master of that.
Sounds like a good idea.
Gordon so in every conceivable format. So he's the master of that. Sideways, upside down, cross-eyed.
It's crazy. So the key thing for me was one, we made sure that in the bio we had a link to our club's webpage for obvious reasons. We're driving the traffic towards the webpage where we have the potential to be able to present the images at a higher resolution. We have a bit more control in how we're going to present it. But initially what we wanted to do was make sure that the Instagram feed itself was at least visually interesting. So we look at the images, try to pick images that would be visually interesting to somebody who's not necessarily interested in stereoscopic images. Though we do have things like the Zoom meetings, we have some suggestions. We have, for example, photographed me with my rig, Brian May's owl viewer, and other things. But mainly with each post that we put up, it's a multiple image post. So here's your 2D version. Here's the side-by-side version, and then here's the anaglyph. Now, one of the obvious things is that with a multiple image post, you can only have one aspect ratio for all the images. So in order to cater for that, you'll see that after the white borders here for the anaglyph, the much wider borders for the side-by-side, and then back to the 2D. So at least it gives the audience a flavor of the image as you might see it as a 2D, and potentially as a 3D, whether you want to look at it side by side or whether you want to look at it as an anaglyph.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. I'll jump in here. Yeah.
Can I put you on the spot and ask you something that I asked you the other day? My guess is you don't have any more answer than you did the other day. But Vanessa, ran the social media campaign to promote the convention, and she was looking at the analytics all the time on who was responding. And we were, even on Instagram, we were still skewing older. Did you ultimately draw any conclusions from that of why, even though we're on this supposedly younger platform, we're still
Yeah, and I just took a look because
so much for Vanessa.
Uh-oh.
So well it lasted.
You only see them in the app and not on the side. But a problem seems to be that we don't reach too many younger people, actually, which is quite sad, because that was actually the aim or the goal of the campaign, to have more mid-20s, I call younger now. That would have been great. But most of the NSA followers were about mid-40, mid-50, and male. And so it was quite interesting that we couldn't reach the younger community.
Do you have any
as much as we knew
as to why why is
I
that?
think, yeah, the problem is still the Instagram algorithm, because nobody really understands it. So I don't really know how it really worked this time, because it was, all our posts were shared by many young people and many women to their followers, and so I don't really understand why we couldn't grow more. We doubled the amount of followers, but yeah, not really the audience which we wanted to achieve or reach.
Yeah, you mentioned an interesting thing that I don't really know squat about, is this algorithm that I guess if you follow a large number of people on Instagram, you don't see every post from every person you
Right.
follow. It starts trimming them down. And I probably don't follow enough people for that to happen for me. But
no, no, the main problem is the interaction, because you have to interact a lot with the people, so you appear in their feed. So that's the crucial part. It doesn't really yeah, it's not enough just to like something. You have to comment, you have to share, you have to use stories. It's a lot of that, but I told you before.
it's time for that.
And of course, there's also the importance of what time of day, what day of the week
Yeah.
you post on Instagram, and that's a factor on Facebook as well. And that's perhaps a little bit too specific now, but there are lots of resources online if your goal is really to
Right.
amass followers on Instagram, and that is a very slow process that you have to have patience with, unless you pay money to buy bots, and they might not like your 3D as much as unless you're using AI for 3D. That could work out. But I did want to mention I'd like to eventually steer back to an earlier question we had, and also it was discussed in the chat a little bit, and the basic question is the problem of which formats to use when you share your work on whichever social media platform you're talking about. I was going to say that as David Starkman commented, there are definitely photos that I take, stereo photos I take, that I instantly realize are not really suitable for Instagram, and part of it is just this small screen is right. That's an upper limit that you're never going to transcend, but you can work around that in certain ways. And let me show you a little bit of how I post some things. So for example, here's my 3D Instagram page. What I'll do sometimes, as David mentioned, is I will post things sideways, which maximizes how much you see when you're viewing on your phone, right? And your phone is in landscape mode. However, on the desktop, it doesn't automatically rotate. But as I was mentioning, with one of the things with large pictures, like you wouldn't be able to appreciate this as it is, but I'll do things like this, make a zooming in video to actually appreciate details, and then I'll post. This is again still sideways, but this is parallel view. This is then these are cross-eye, but then the anaglyph fits better in this portrait orientation. And then I also make sure to post upright versions, of cross and parallel as well. However, it is a lot of work to, I think I've used the maximum 10 slots for this one post here. And for other uses, as was mentioned with like the wiggle GIFs, I will do something like have my first photo be something like this. And this is this is not a wiggle GIF, but this is kind of a photo animation that I've made with Stereo Photo Maker using a depth map. And I'll talk more about that at my workshop on Sunday. But as Stephen mentioned, thinking about formats that attract not only people who happen to have the glasses handy or can free view or have other viewers, I think this is at least appealing to your layman, to your 2D layman. And a similar format to that is, the Facebook 3D photos, which, as we appreciate, are not really 3D, but they're based on 3D modeling. But so again, there's that appeal, but you have to go, you have to do some extra steps to get it to that format if you want to try to draw in lay people. So one of the questions for which formats we choose, it depends on which audience you're trying to reach. So for other panelists here, what 3D formats do you use or do you recommend?
Well, I don't like to use anti-glyph because I don't want to assume people have the glasses. But of course, having said that, the idea that they're going to be able to free view either parallel or cross is a rather big step anyway. So I figure my audience is 3D savvy. But the bottom line is that as somebody who spent, whatever the heck it was, 40 something years shooting stuff in portrait in a landscape mode for projection with relatively small amounts of parallax, the 1/30th rule, I am now doing precisely the opposite of everything I ever did. I'm shooting stuff in a very narrow, tall format, and I'm putting it, somewhere between 1/20th and 1/15th parallax in the biggest. You don't even see that there's any 3D in the thing if you don't amp it up that much. So the bottom line is you really have to shoot stuff for the medium. I've got zillions of photos I've taken for decades, and I thought, I'll just start loading all this stuff up, and it's like they just yawn. They're total yawns when you see them on Instagram, especially since it doesn't support screen rotation. So they're wide images that are so tiny and there's so little parallax in them on that scale that they're just a waste of time. So because I now take stuff either for it, or if I'm taking a cha-cha, I will take a very extreme pair that I use for Instagram, and then a more normal one I might use for projection or TV. But that's it. Shoot. I would say don't try to repurpose your stuff. Take your stuff for the medium. Otherwise, it won't have impact. And then it's the age-old problem of 3D. If you either need a viewer or some instruction on how to view it, there is no getting around that. And so that you just got to pick which one you think is going to appeal.
I'm very basic. I only post parallel and cross. I only free view parallels, but I know some people can only see cross, so I'll post both of them. Typically, people will put the parallel version as a slide before the cross version, but there are different preferences, so you can do what you want, but that's about the convention. I don't like anaglyphs. I dislike them. I think they sap the color, and if you're gonna have an external glasses, you might as well have this external glasses, even if you can't preview, right? Plug. I only post upright. I know Gordon likes to rotate them, which allows for the wider view. I think it's confusing personally for my own feed, so I don't do it. I often end up previewing Gordon's rotated ones, but in the wrong direction, and then I'll complain to him.
Yes, I know.
Frequently complaining to Gordon about that. So I think it just for a cleaner feed, I end up doing that. But I know that there are some limitations because the wider view does allow you to have a more, horizontally based stereo. So it's difficult. But again, it's up to personal preference. I don't think anybody's gonna get on anybody's case for posting in other formats.
I'll take it a step further. So I figured that Instagram is got its limitations in terms of aspect and in resolution limitations. So as I said, we try to use Instagram to drive traffic towards our website. So the next phase is to look at how to present our content on a web page. And my thinking was you need to take the extension of the mobile device. A person, particularly younger generation, will still use a mobile device to view a web page. So I can I'll share my screen again and just show you what I've been working on as a test. Hopefully I can get it to work. So this is a view of my phone, which is on my test web page, which has a gallery. So I'll just tap on the gallery. Just let it. So here's a gallery that I've set up. And I've set up two versions of it. I set up a gallery that just simply uses cascading style sheets and HTML. So if I tap on one of the galleries, and there's a whole series of photos. Let me just tap on the first one, bring up the. So I built this little viewer, which has a number of different buttons across the top to present the image in different formats. So for example, here, this is a portrait image, but if you've got a parallel, it's in landscape mode. So what I did was I put CSS to allow me to present the image when it's rotated, and when I double tap, it zooms in and shows it to me. So if I use some sort of viewer or free view, I can actually look at this image, hopefully with enough resolution that you get the desired effect. So I can switch between cross, parallel, and then if I want to look at anaglyphs, in a way I kind of like anaglyphs, but for a lot of my artistic nudes, for example, I actually use my anaglyphs as black and whites. I don't care about the color. So to me, anaglyphs work in some respects. But if you want to see the image as a 2D image, then that's what you get. Then I thought, oh, I'll experiment, and I thought, oh, you try out with StereoPix. So I set up an alternate gallery using StereoPix. Let me just bring that up, because I wanted to see how StereoPix would work on a mobile device. So here you can see there's the anaglyph version. If I tap and bring up and switch to parallel, just an example, tap on that again, there you have it. But if I rotate the image, oops, you see that you can actually see the image as side by side as well. But you notice one thing, right? Which is but because you're using your finger to swipe, when you touch the screen with StereoPix, it also means that you can inadvertently bring up the menu for changing the viewing mode. So that's a little bit of a distraction. However, it's not too bad. If you rotate the phone back, you see that it doesn't fit the image format as well. So there are some difficulties, whichever way you go about doing it. But they're early experiments, and I think maybe it's a way forward.
Well, I would kill for Instagram to, you should start a company and then Instagram should buy it for $1 billion or $2 and put exactly that functionality in, because I mean, that's my dream, is to have exactly what you just showed. I'd kill just to have the screen rotation.
Yeah,
and
so I did try that. So the initial gallery that I created was because most websites also use WordPress. I decided I needed to do something that would accommodate or would work within a WordPress environment. And so that was simply purely built using WordPress and using CSS and HTML. So I wasn't dependent on an engine like StereoPix. I'm a bit of a control freak, but anyway. But I did try the StereoPix version as well as an alternative to see how that would work. And it actually works quite well, except that because on a mobile device, you're using your finger to tap on the screen, it creates a conflicting issue because you have to tap on the screen or use to click on the mouse to bring up the viewing mode. And that becomes a bit intrusive when you're actually using StereoPix. Otherwise, StereoPix works pretty well.
And speaking of StereoPix, actually, so that Jack, the creator, I see is in the audience here, and I did want to introduce StereoPix briefly to folks who aren't familiar with it, as it's kind of a it's kind of a hybrid thing where it is arguably a social media platform, though a small one, but it is specifically 3D tailored, and I think a lot of people perhaps are not familiar with it. But let me show you. Let me show you briefly, however I can see. And this is stuck. Okay, but basically it's, you may have seen StereoPix's functionality as like an embedded web viewer. And indeed there are some gallery examples of that on the Con webpage already. But it's also its own site as well. Jack himself describes it as kind of a smaller, obviously smaller than the giant social media platforms, but a growing community of folks. It does have the kind of social media like functions like commenting on photos. You can chat with people. But then of course the big plus for 3D folks is you only have to upload your 3D image once as like a stereo pair. or a separate left and right or an MPO, and then you can automatically convert it to this enormous list of formats. So that's, for a lot of stereographers, that's super convenient. Perhaps for a minority of stereographers like Stephen and myself, it's actually, it can be a slight drawback because I'm very perfectionist about creating my own anaglyph versions of stereo pairs. And I have a very specific way I like to do that. And kind of for that reason, similar to Stephen, I have my own World of Depth website where I custom make every version of a stereo on there. But of course, this is convenience and can't be beat just for the sheer number of options here. Also, Jack has talked about implementing a zooming in option, which is great and something I don't have on my site. There's also what I'm showing here is a VR viewing mode, so you can use StereoPix with your headset. And of course, when you're actually using that, it would be only in parallel view on your headset, but I put in cross here so you can appreciate this shot. Another function he's recently added is the ability to kind of automatically create these social media cards. So if you share a link to your image on StereoPix, it automatically generates a nice little preview photo. So here's an example of Facebook. And did I include? No, and that also works on Twitter and other platforms. And of course, it also has kind of some of the organizing features you'd find on other photo-centric websites that are not just as limited as Instagram. So you can make photo albums and things like that. Let's see, and I'm not sure if Jack wanted to add anything. Let's see. Jack, I know you are here. I'm trying to find you in this list. If you would like to say something, I'll invite you to unmute and add anything, but it's not. But only if you'd like.
Okay. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, cool. I don't know. I've not anything to say specifically, but if you have question, I can answer quickly.
Does anyone have any questions regarding StereoPix? I do recommend everyone check it out. Yes, and StereoPix Rooms is that great function as well. Some of you may know Firio was an older, very, very 3D photography oriented, very cool site that is unfortunately defunct. So it's great to have StereoPix as a superior replacement.
Well, certainly our club's looking at using StereoPix to present a lot of our images from our club competitions on a monthly basis. And we're also looking at the rooms capability of StereoPix to allow us to present our club competition images during Zoom meetings, which is a very useful function. And if people don't know what that is, so StereoPix has a rooms function where a presenter can create a StereoPix gallery, and as the presenter, control the changing of the images, and the viewers or the audience will see those changes occur as the images are changed by the presenter. So in our setup, we would be looking at having a Zoom window and a second window on a web browser, which would be viewing the presentation through StereoPix.
I just wanted to point out that was the functionality that we used earlier in the stereoscopic sessions today.
I was asleep for those ones.
And let me now pose a slightly different question, but I know one that a lot of people have had and some folks in the chat have alluded to, and that is basically for all of us panelists here, and also for anyone else who wants to chime in. The question is, what is your workflow starting from taking the actual pictures to sharing it on social media? And in particular, if there are if there are specific apps or programs, also devices that you recommend, please let us know about that. And I think I know Sarah has lots of thoughts about this. Sarah, do you want to answer this first?
Sure. I'm always talking to David about this because David's very old school and he's all like very desktop based, I would assume. Is that correct to say? And I'm very mobile based.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just going to urge Gordon to bring up this question because this is exactly it. I wasn't even aware that there's this entire phone ecosystem of acquiring, processing, and presenting your images. I do what I do because those are the tools I have. But yeah, go for it. Tell us how you do it.
Yeah, I barely even use the computer. I use it when I do conversions because I have to use Stereo Photo Maker. I tried to get Masuji to let me have a function that I can do conversions like without going to the desktop, but there's apparently some technical thing. So maybe in the future, but I can't take a stereo without editing it in about 12 different apps first. And that's why my phone is a mess all the time. So I wrote this out. This is basic stereo. This is like cha-cha stereo. So first I take it either directly in the camera app or in i3D Steroid. So it has the ghost image to guide the second shot. Regardless of the way that I take it, I then use i3D Steroid to auto align the image. Now it even has a method to color correct using either the left or the right image as a reference. So that's pretty good. I usually don't edit it past that point yet, and I'll just keep the raw stereo. I export that as a parallel. If it's a portrait or it has faces in it, I'll typically throw it into Remini, which is an app that uses AI to upscale faces into HD. And I figure that you need the most HD that you can get when you're posting on Instagram, which likes to degrade the hell out of every image. So I'll do that first. Sometimes it gets a bit too hyper realistic. So I'll use an app like PhotoLeap to blend the original and the upscaled image together in whatever way makes it look most realistic. Then I'll take the image that creates, I'll put it into PS Express, which is the Photoshop mobile app, to edit the lighting, colors, to add tweaks like vignettes or grains. I love a good grain, and the PS Express has a really beautiful grain, actually. I can also use the heal tool to get rid of rivalries. If there's too many, the image isn't worth posting. I'm very selective about what I post. So if it's good enough, but it has some rivalries, I'll edit it. If the image has merit, but it's enough of a rivalry that the mobile app can't fix it easily, I usually will have to export it onto my desktop and use the clone stamp tool in Photoshop. I know some people clone in Stereo Photo Maker. I personally find it more precise to use Photoshop, and I zoom in, open it in a completely different document so that I can see free view the whole time, ruin my eyes or improve them. I don't know. Jury's out on that one. Am I making them better or worse by free viewing for 12 hours at a time? And so then I'll put it back in, export that when I'm happy with that image. Then I'll throw it into i3D Steroid again to get the crop that I want. And importantly, to put the stereo window where I want it. I feel like this step is often missed in stereos that I see online. It's so easy to fix. Please learn about the stereo window. Can we talk about that some more? So I use the setting in i3D Steroid that locks the images side by side and adds a nice border with the curved corners. And then I'll flip it to the cross version. I'll export that too. Then I have to make sure the aspect ratio is right for Instagram. If it's not, then I'll use an app called SquareFit, which puts it in the ratio that I want. Despite its name, it can put photos into any ratio, not just squares. And that's just for taking cha-chas, not for conversions, which is a whole different ballgame, would require a whole different special interest group. But that's the most basic image. And so I'll have 12 different versions on my phone. But that's why I never post either, because it didn't take so much.
There's a
Now I feel
question,
like-
Sarah, of how long that takes you for a single stereo.
Oh my gosh, a lot. I mean, I couldn't even tell you, hours.
I feel like a
But-
total amateur now because I just I use Stereo Photo Maker. Yeah. And I mean, this is what I wanted to have as a workshop. To me, this is the info we need to get out. It's Stereo Photo Maker. I love it, but it is, the past, and it's not the tool for phone-centric stuff. Sure, it's great for what I do. But I really want to see, I hope you will volunteer to do a workshop or whatever, or a series, because you covered a lot of ground there in the future. And I know Vanessa uses all sorts of tools I don't even know about. what the heck is that thing called you use on for drawing? I've already forgotten the name of it. Yeah, but,
Yeah, you mean on my iPad?
no, Vanessa, what's the thing you use for
Oh.
drawing on the iPad? I can't remember the name of it.
It's Procreate.
Oh yeah,
Much,
how could I
much
forget that?
cheaper than Photoshop.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
and
want to.
Stereo Photo
oh,
Maker is wonderful. It has a lot of options that are not available on mobile. And if you want a more precise, like auto align and the features, there's no matching Stereo Photo Maker. But that's going to add another hour to my already like 5 hour to post one stereo thing. So
And I'll describe my workflow briefly here because I think I'm somewhere in between Sarah and folks like David Starkman, who's chimed in and said I do everything for 3D on a computer. So basically, I in the same way as David, I only occasionally use my phone to take sequentials, but since I've made a catadaptric rig, and so now I'm taking videos and more stereos using my phone. But basically, something that Sarah doesn't have to deal with because it's all on phone is the question of how to get just your files between devices. And because I have a Mac laptop and a super old iPhone, you can see because I can actually hold it in my hand and it's not bigger than my head. I can use Apple's just iCloud to get it to my laptop, and it doesn't, there's no loss of resolution that way. So it's not too bad. That's using iPhoto. But then I use Stereo Photo Maker typically to auto align things, but I have a lot of other programs like Huggin, which I use sometimes when Stereo Photo Maker's auto align is insufficient. And then of course, for my special things like the mirror stereos, I'm doing a lot of things by hand and also using Photopea, which is basically a free browser version of Photoshop to do some more advanced editing, like color correcting a certain strip of the reflected image with mirror stereos where there's a little color from the mirror that I use. And of course, selective sharpening, things like that. And then as I mentioned before, I'm very particular about making like my method for converting to anaglyph. So I use all these programs, also ImageMagick, which is a command line program, and FFmpeg for doing fancy things like the stereo videos I mentioned. And then I use a variety of AI programs, which we'll talk about Sunday, which can do neat things like make fancy, very smooth like photo animations that are in either 3D or 2D versions. But I do all that, and then I use AirDrop to get them back onto my phone if I'm posting to certain accounts on Instagram. But thankfully, my 3D account for Instagram, I think it's a feature that they're rolling out where you can now do an entire post from your desktop. Thankfully now I can do that for my World of Depth account. So now after I'm done editing the photos, I should mention also as David Starkman anticipated perhaps, that once I have the photos done to my satisfaction, I then often have to reformat them specifically for Instagram. And then I can use the Instagram desktop app to actually put them on there. But it's another step. And as Stephen mentioned, when you're making those multi-image posts, each image has to have the same aspect ratio. So my methodology is basically padding out all the pictures to be like a certain dimension. So I don't have problems with that, but of course it gets quite complicated. But David, Stephen, Vanessa, do you want to add anything else about like workflows and how you do it?
Moving the photos around things seems so trivial, but it is amazingly problematic. And for a long time, I would the one thing I had that I could get to easily on every device is my Gmail account. So I would open up a blank message, I would attach the files, and then I would just quit it. So now it's in my drafts. Then I go to whichever other device I want, sign into Gmail there, and pull them off. But now I've taken to just using like Signal or WhatsApp, and those have a thing where you can send stuff to yourself. So I just put them on that. Then, like I say, if I'm on the computer, I put it on Signal. Then I go onto my phone, and boom, there they are on Signal. I pull them down. So it would seem like that should be the most trivial and mechanical thing, but I spend an awful lot of time moving stuff between devices, it seems like.
Yeah, I've really learned to appreciate the airdrop function from an iPhone to Mac. That's really great. And my workflow is actually basically the same as Sarah's, so nothing more to add. I use practically the same apps. So.
My workflow is a little bit, I guess, it's very similar to David's and to Gordon's. I basically take 2 images from my camera because I've got a twin rig, and I manually align them in Photoshop. I'll do my color correction and all of that in Photoshop, and then I create the images in Photoshop. But lately, what I've been doing is I've been exporting left-right images and then importing them into Stereo Photo Maker and using the auto align to help me align the images better. And the reason for that is because I'm stereo blind. So whenever I do all my alignment, I actually have to convert my images always to anaglyph to actually do the alignment. So lately I've been trying to use Stereo Photo Maker to do the auto alignment, but the only thing I would do is I override the positioning of the window. Quite often I find that with the auto alignment, the window is not where I want it to be. So I'll override that. But apart from that, the auto alignment is pretty good.
I just on that note, a quick note, Stephen, about that in Stereo Photo Maker, at least for the desktop version we're talking about here, if you dig into preferences, there are things that I like to disable because I like that additional amount of control. And I think one of them is do not automatically adjust the stereo window. There are some options along the lines of those that you can disable if you want to create more work but have more control for yourself. At this moment, just because we're almost out of time here, I did want to open it up to everyone to in case folks wanted to unmute and ask questions to us that way, or just add some things to this discussion on the video. So I'm gonna allow folks to unmute themselves, but of course, please be judicious with that, folks. And if there's some background noise, I'll temporarily mute everyone and reset it in that case. But I know David Starkman in particular was talking about wanting to say something. David, would you like to jump in?
Well, I'm 71. I guess I'm a dinosaur, and the only reason I got on Instagram was the Tokyo Stereo Club. That was the only way I could upload photos to enter their competition, and I finally stopped doing it partly because their meetings went so late. I was just, I just couldn't stay up for them, and also I had to write a whole page of instructions that I have to look at every single time to get my pictures formatted, because I take normal 3D pictures like with a Fuji 3D camera. And, the first time I tried to enter, I just dragged them over, put them in. And of course, the sides are cropped off. And, then all that reformatting just drove me nuts. And then there's the resolution. And I thought, okay, how come mine are coming out when they're showing them on the Tokyo site? Some of them come out tiny on a computer laptop. Some of them come out large. Mine were always coming out small. And I don't know, it's just not very user friendly. I'm one of those people that I just do it all on the computer. As far as getting pictures from the phone to the computer, with my old phone, I would literally just take the SD card out and put it in a reader. My new phone, it's an Android phone, but guess what? They followed iPhone's the way they do it, and no longer is there an external SD card, but I just plug in the USB cable and just drag them over to the folder I want them to be in. I don't need to use any programs wirelessly, and it works easily. And well, I don't know, it's just my 2 cents, but to get an image processed, I take the photo, I bring it into Stereo Photo Maker, I get things aligned the way I want. I match color matching if I need to get exposures. And then any further work, I don't use Photoshop, but I use a similar program. called ACDC to do any color and exposure and other manipulations like that and special effects. So I'll just leave it at that. But it's just a few steps. And Instagram drives me nuts.
Not only you, David.
Yeah.
I did want to say as a reminder here, now that we're talking about, oh, okay. Yeah, I did want to say as a reminder when we're talking about these processes that are very labor intensive, that yes, that while we're talking about these labor intensive processes, that I encourage you to think about what your goal is with using social media. Like as Stephen said, if you're helping out a club and your goal is to, recruit new people, or if, I guess this ties into, for myself in my day job as a musician, kind of, I designed a couple of websites for a band and for me as an individual musician from scratch. And part of what I was thinking about in designing those was what's the end goal. It's not, and for social media as well. And it wasn't, like a website with your biography and stuff can be someplace where you tell people the story, your personal story, the story of your 3D club, its history, for example. But maybe your end goals are, again, getting people to join or come to meetings in person. Whereas as a musician, it might be, for me, the goal might be to get people to call me, like hire my band for private gigs or buy albums. And then as Stephen suggested, then the purpose of the social media for me as a musician is often just to drive people to my website. But if it's more to share your work or more to learn, gather advice or gather feedback from other folks, that's going to obviously influence you to do things in different ways. So don't forget about that. I would advise not to just wade in, just to try it out. At least don't devote so many hours to it, unless you have a clear purpose in mind.
I also wanted to say, as we're probably wrapping up here, and that is whether you take stuff or not, get on Instagram just to look at what's on there, because in my opinion, it's the future. I see a ton of exciting, great photography there every single day. I see people's work who just amazes me. It inspires me. It's just great. There's a ton of stuff going on. Again, I work with all these organizations that have seen their memberships and their interactions decline literally for decades. All of them are looking at, their possible death. And then suddenly I find there is a community that is very much alive, and it's amazing. And, say get on there. And if you just want to look, just look, because there's an amazing, there's a ton of amazing 3D there.
Gordon, just to echo what you were saying, back to the formatting, as far as in Stereo Photomaker's preferences to turn off automatically attempting to adjust the stereo window, which is how it should be phrased. I can't remember exactly how it's phrased.
Yes.
Yeah, because the thing is, there's no actual computer algorithm that can do that correctly every time. It's impossible. Even AI will probably never do it, because if you've got something that you want coming, way out of the window, way through the window without breaking the window, because you've got other stuff around it, AI is probably not going to figure out that that's what you want. So yeah, I always tell people, always turn off that. Yeah, you're right. You got to choose the settings judiciously.
Right.
Speech therapy and a little more caffeine will be good to do that right.
Yeah, it's as always, it's a trade-off between efficiency and control.
Really.
Yeah.
Well, the late great Ray Zone once said that I am Talmudically orthodox when it comes to the stereo window, and that was actually a pretty accurate description. But I will say, the simple fact of the matter is it matters to a much lesser extent on Instagram, almost to the point of not mattering at all. And so my my orthodoxy on that is greatly relaxed. I mean, I still window my stuff, but it just doesn't matter as much. The rules are very different on that tiny little phone screen.
I would add to that by saying the processes that Sarah described, it seems like there's potential creativity that can happen amongst and in between stuff accidentally even. Like it seems like there's a potential of this kind of blossoming in a way rather than just going for a final specific image. It's like, oh, look what happened.
That's always been true in photography, of course, that, you know, taking the picture is just the first step, and where you take it from there can make such a difference.
I just wanted to say, if David is stepping down from the head of the cult of the stereo window, I would be willing to be the new president. I think it's very important, even on Instagram. And I think it makes a difference because it shows kind of that you know what you're doing, really. And aside from making your stereos much more comfortable to view, you know, I'm not very orthodox about, you know, how much you're going to make something pop as long as there's not a violation on the edges. But if you take the time to learn about it, and it doesn't take very long, if you can view stereos properly, I think it really makes them pop.
You've all witnessed this historic moment when Sarah has now become the stereo sheriff and taken it away from me.
But I really agree with Sarah. And it's even easier to adjust the stereo window on your phone because you can actually do it with your fingers while previewing. So for me, it's actually easier to do it on the phone than on the computer.
I think, yeah, Pascal has demonstrated that to me recently, and it was very impressive, very efficient. But again, as to Rob's point about the, you know, kind of efficiency versus control, I can't do my method of setting the left and right borders independently, and sometimes setting them at different depth levels on the phone. But yes, many options, many options.
One thing I do is I shoot raw when I'm shooting regular shots anyway, because I know in 10 years, we're going to have technology that will take the raw and be able to do something much more with it than we're doing with these little Instagram shots.
If we don't have any, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. Just regarding doing a lot of editing on the phone, and Sarah, you're probably going to hate this, but what the reason I do everything on a computer is because I've got this 27-inch monitor. In fact, it's a 27-inch 3D monitor, and man, I'm spoiled. I mean, trying to do the stuff I do. Well, of course, I do some complex stuff. I mean, I did last year's 3D-Con logo. I mean, that's a really complex image. You can't do something like that on a phone, you know, all those different things. So yeah, just, it depends what kind of editing you do. For some things, man, you just got to have a bigger screen.
Well, but it depends on where it's going. You know, of course, I love looking at stuff on my big TV. But when I'm doing it for the phone, if I don't do it at some point on that, I will get a wrong sense because, yeah, I look at it on my 55-inch TV and it's like, oh, the depth on that's amazing. I put it on the phone. It's like, hold it. Did I upload it right? Because there seems to be no goddamn depth, you know?
Oh,
so,
that is,
you know, that's it.
That is completely true. In fact, I'm forever, if I know where that's going to end up being printed this, you know, this small or being this size on the web or whatever, then yeah, I end up doing, I may not put it on the phone, but I'll actually look at really shrunken versions on the monitor, et cetera, to try to get myself oriented. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
It gets cumbersome, you know, but if you really want to be perfectionist and really take every stereo photo such that it could be displayed on your phone, on your laptop, on a computer for projection, then you can always do something like, of course, take take instead of just 2 sequentials, take a whole series of sequentials, create a stereo pair with less depth when you're displaying on a large screen or projector, a medium amount of depth for desktop, perhaps a little more for your phone size. Of course, then you're going to crop and just focus in on just a certain selection for your phone. But again, it's a lot of work, and it's about choosing what you want to do and what your purpose is.
I think that, myself personally, when you put that level of work into a photo, and I can't even think of an instance where, even with how fantastic, like my Android, how fantastic the photos are that I can get out of it. I can't think of an instance where at some point I didn't want to run it through Stereo Photo Maker or run it through Photoshop and do something to it. And at the end of the day, when you take the time to put into a photo, I find it's a lot easier. When I get done editing a photo, for me, it's this 2 or 3 minute process, and I save it in multiple formats. I do my parallel view. I do, my full size parallel view is like your master. And then, I do sized cross views, sized parallel. If I want to put it on Instagram, I'll do like a tighter crop on it. And I save them in separate folders. Here's my Instagram folder. Here's my Flickr photo folder, and I don't know, to me, it's not that much of a headache to do that. I guess it's just kind of deciding where you want to put your photos at the end of the day. But, and I will agree with David that looking at a tiny little screen on Instagram is a lot more forgiving on the eyeballs to a certain degree. But David, you're a heretic.
Well, I mean, it's funny because that's it. I still am completely Photoshop and SPM centric because those are the tools I have and they're convenient for me. But when I first got onto these platforms, that again, I went in there, trying to teach everybody about SPM and Photoshop. But after some of the people who are right here showed me amazing stuff, and I asked them what did they do, and they told me a bunch of apps that I'd never even freaking heard of. I started to realize, hey, the end of the day, the image is blowing my mind. So they're doing something right. And it may not be the way I want to work because, I'm sitting on my desktop, it's convenient, but it certainly is working for them. And I think it's the future. And that's why I really want to promote it.
I will admit to being a horrible human being. And when I see a photo on Instagram that has a horrible, nasty window violation, I don't like it. So, sorry, guys.
And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up here. We're kind of running a little over.
Yes.
More than a little.
So thank you all to the panelists once again.
Yes,
and I know
thank you.
Especially for many of them, it is in the middle of the night or at other odd hours. So thanks very much. And thank you to Linda and our other organizers behind the scenes there. And thank you for everyone for attending this.
Thank you, Gordon.
Yep. So hope to see everyone at the happy hour.
Yeah.
See you.